Hey guys, and welcome! It's been a full year already since the release of Battlefield 2042, and a lot has happened in the past 12 months, so I thought it's time for a bit of a recap and also an honest look at everything that was done and at the content that was added, and also at how the game has evolved since its release and what its current state is. And I guess we all can remember that the launch of 2042 was very rocky to say the least, and that it already lost loads of players within the first couple of weeks. Not only because of its lack of content or the specialists that were introduced instead of the usual class system, but mostly because the game was only a shell of what it should have been and had loads of bugs and performance issues. Especially the players who bought the expensive Gold or Ultimate editions to be able to jump into the game 1 week earlier had to face massive stutters, bugs, FPS drops, server issues, problems with the weapon balance, and hovercrafts that were even able to climb full skyscrapers. All of this was followed by other game-breaking bugs like the horizontal movement issue on PC that was introduced with one of the updates only a few weeks after release, and that made Battlefield 2042 to one of the games with the most negative reviews on Steam and probably also on other platforms. During the first 4 weeks, the Steam player count dropped from over 100,000 to not even 50,000, and this decrease should continue in the following months until the game had barely 2,000 concurrent players at some days. Only the free-to-play weekend on Steam and the Christmas sale slightly increased the player count again, but even though there were weekly missions added towards the end of the year with which all players could unlock rewards like new weapon, vehicle or specialist skins or weapon charms, the player base kept shrinking. And this was not only because of the radio silence and missing updates or bug fixes during this time, but also because more and more players were not able to find full servers anymore, especially in regions outside of Europe and North America. So this caused a lot of frustration, and before DICE was even able to add missing features like the scoreboard or a voice chat, more than 90% of the player base was gone. In the last recap I did, after about 4 months of the release, I compared Battlefield 2042 to buying a car. The whole vehicle is promised when you send your money over, but then when it's delivered it's missing the wheels, engine, steering wheel and a lot more, and every month you receive a small package with a few missing parts, and maybe one day you'll be able to fully assemble it and have a drivable car. And it still feels like this sometimes even after a year, but it would be a lie to say that the game hasn't improved. Loads of bugs were fixed, many issues have been resolved, weapons and attachments were overhauled, and features that should have been in the game right from the start have been added. But what about the missing content and the bad map design that was a huge point of criticism right after release? Well, that still took a while, but eventually started with the launch of Season 1 in early summer. Originally, the first season of Battlefield 2042 was scheduled for January and then delayed to March of 2022. But then, after a long radio silence, we got the news that it will be postponed to early summer. And at this point it was even questionable if the devs were able to hold this date. But then, on June 9th, Season 1 0 Hour was released and added 1 new map, 1 new specialist, 2 new weapons, 1 new gadget, 2 new helicopters, a battle pass and an item store to the game. And even though the start of the season was a bit rocky as well, the reception of the player base was mostly positive, and 2042 was even able to increase its Steam player count to over 10,000 concurrent players again. The Battle Pass system, that was also new for Battlefield at this point, was made pretty well, and the rewards are comparable to other games with the same system. The 2 new helicopters were not so well received by the player base at the beginning because of their high agility and the ability to go into a stealth mode, but after a few tweaks and improvements they were balanced out pretty well. Same with the BSVM, the new marksman rifle that was added. Shortly after the start of Season 1 it was probably the most played weapon in the whole game because of its high versatility and range, but a few updates later it's at a good spot and not better or worse than other rifles. So the few issues the season and its content had started with were ironed out successfully and made the game a lot more fun to play than before. Later on in Season 1, DICE also added a reworked version of Kaleidoscope that came with a lot more cover, higher differences in terrain and tweaked objective areas, and this improved the map so much that it turned from one of the maps I hated the most to one of my favorites. And even though the number of content that was added with this season might not seem to be much, it made a huge difference to a game that had started in such a poor state. On August 30th, Season 1 was then followed by Season 2, Master of Arms, and this one added the most content to the game so far and also came with a lot more surprises like free cosmetic items or a mid-season event. There was one new map, one new specialist, 3 new weapons, a gadget, 2 new ground vehicles and a battle pass full of cosmetic items added again, and it seemed like the developers got the balance pretty good right from the start this time, except for the Advances LMG maybe. But after a few tweaks, this is also pretty good now. The 2 reworked maps Renewal and Orbital that were added throughout the season also made it more fun to hop into the game and play a few matches, cause they finally feel like finished maps and not only like sketches. But despite all the improvements made during the season, there was still a small drop of bitterness, and these were the 8 vault weapons that were added as well, so the old weapons coming over from Battlefield Portal. I know that a lot of players were looking forward to playing their beloved guns from Bad Company 2 or Battlefield 3 in 2042 and to unlocking their attachments and skins, and so did I, but the balance of these weapons was a bit underwhelming to say the least, and they've been outgunned by most other rifles in their category or even outside of their category. Most of the vault weapons have been improved by now and are more comparable to other 2042 weapons, but some of them are still a bit out of balance and will hopefully get fixed with future updates. I have also still hope for the missing weapon skins, or at least the ones for the Tier 1 Mastery, cause right now the absence of unlockable attachments and camos make them a little less attractive for playing. Nevertheless, the introduction of vault weapons added a lot more variety and also more weapons in general to the game, and this will also be kept up with Season 3, and it even looks like some of the gadgets will find their way over from Portal as well, alongside the reintroduction of the class system. And then, the last point that needs to be addressed when talking about Season 2 is the Liquidators mid-season event that was held in week 7 and 8. The event added a more tactical close combat mode and several cosmetic items to the game that could either be unlocked by playing or bought with in-game currency in the item store. And in general, I found that the idea of this event was great, especially to keep players engaged in the middle of the season where the player count usually starts to decline. But the large number of specialist and weapon skins that were locked behind the paywall of the item store was a huge drop of bitterness here. I've already made a full video about this, so I'm not going more into detail here, and we already know from the latest development update that DICE has learned from the feedback of the community and will try to make the next event more rewarding and more interesting to play. So with the first 2 seasons of the game, Battlefield 2042 and its core part All Out War have been improved a lot and are at a very solid state now, with a good variety of weapons, a number of well-designed maps and a battle pass system that works pretty good, except for the seasonal player card badge maybe. But All Out War was only one of 3 main parts that were released with 2042. So what happened to the other 2? Did they improve in the same way? Well, let's make it short, no, they didn't. Cause as much as All Out War has been improved, Portal and Hazard Zone have been neglected. And especially Hazard Zone was hit pretty hard cause the official support for the mode was already ended earlier this year. It still gets some bug fixes and sometimes even a new feature or a few improvements, but no new content anymore. And except for some die-hard players who really love the mode, it was also abandoned by the wider player base. Maybe because the mode didn't fit very well onto the concept of Battlefield, maybe because it was not what Battlefield players wanted primarily, or maybe because it had the same technical issues the main game had at launch. I think they should have released Hazard Zone independently from All Out War and free to play, cause the mode is actually not too bad. It just should have been made accessible to a wider player base than only the Battlefield players. Portal, on the other hand, fits the overall concept of 2042 a lot better and is a nice addition and a great idea, but it also couldn't really live up to its full potential, at least not yet. And besides the weekly featured experiences, the mode is mostly a home for XP farming and hardcore modes and not the creative pool of community creations it was advertised with. There is a community for Portal and this also started to grow a lot more recently and has a great archive of various experiences, but it's all still based on the same 3 eras and 6 maps the game was shipped with. So in a whole year there were no new eras added to Portal, no new maps and only a handful of weapons and vehicles for the already existing eras. I was pretty excited about the mode before the release and had high expectations for it, but like I said, it couldn't really live up to it. Nevertheless, the featured Portal mode experiences and also some of the community creations we got to play so far were always fun to try out, and who knows, maybe Portal will be the mode that keeps Battlefield 2042 interesting and alive even after the end of the live service for All Out War. I would absolutely love to see this, cause I think it still has a lot more potential than just being an XP farm, and maybe we will even see Portal implemented to the next Battlefield title in the same way it is available in 2042 now, as some kind of cross-game experience. And that would be cool. So the game has had a lot of ups and downs and very rough times during its first year, but the question is, was it enough? Has the game really evolved? Is it a lot better now than it was at release, and would I recommend it to my friends? And I would say yes to all of this. The game is a lot better now than it was at release, of course it is, and I guess everyone who played it for this whole year will agree with me on this. It also has evolved, it got new content, the seasons were running pretty well so far, a lot of bugs and issues have been fixed, the performance was improved and so on, and also the features that were missing at launch and that the community had requested, like voice chat or the scoreboard, have been implemented. And of course there's always room for improvements and there's still bugs and issues to fix, and even these days the game can still be frustrating at times. But in general I would say that the developers did a great job improving the game during this year, and I can't wait to see what they have prepared for us in Season 3 and 4 and beyond. But I would also say that only now the game is at the state it should have been at release, and the first year felt a bit like an early access instead of a finished AAA title. Nevertheless, I have stuck to the game since launch, and even though there were a lot of ups and downs, I'm happy it has improved so much, and I'm happy to see the game in the state it is now. I gotta be honest, a year ago I would have not recommended the game to anyone and would have suggested to wait until at least the launch of the first season, but now I'd say the game is at a good and solid state and very enjoyable most of the time. And I'm happy that a lot of players will have the chance to experience this improved version of Battlefield 2042 with its introduction to the Xbox Game Pass and EA Play in November, and also the additional free-to-play weekends during December. And that's it for today. Feel free to tell me in the comments below how you experienced the first year of Battlefield 2042 and what you think about it now. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for more content like this. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm the Catwoman and you are awesome.